and welcome to the PhD Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast discussing all things PhD life and progressive ideas to create a way forward in academia that's more inclusive, equal, and diverse. You are tuned into episode 2, and I'm your host, Dr. Ruth. Now, if you're new to this channel, a very warm welcome to you, and to all my returning listeners, thank you so much. Don't forget to join in on all the dialogue and conversation by engaging with us on all of our socials. We're a global interactive forum for all PhD students, early career researchers and academics around the world to come together, share experiences, learn and draw inspiration from each other. So you can connect with us on Instagram, Twitter and YouTube at the PhD Podcast. We'll be happy to hear from you. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, as we would like all of our listeners to get the most value from our platform, and you'll be the first to receive notifications of future content. We will also have our own website, which is www.thephdpodcast.com. So with formalities over, let's dive in. Okay, topic of the day. So the topic that I shall be discussing today is inclusion allies. So what do I mean by that? Well, the term inclusion basically refers to the action of ensuring that everyone is able to be a part of their community, in this case the academic community, and feel welcomed and able to develop a sense of belonging and shared identity. An ally, on the other hand, is someone who actively promotes and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion through intentional, positive, and conscious efforts. Now, guys, in both of these definitions, I have placed emphasis on the word action. Why? This is because many higher education institutions and workplaces already have inclusion policies in place. But policies are not enough, and it is evident from recent figures regarding inclusion and race in academia. So for the purpose of this episode, race in particular with reference to inclusion shall be the focus. Now, I understand that this is not a conversation that everyone wants to hear, but it is a conversation that we must have in order to break down institutional and structural barriers at play and make a way forward in academia that is more inclusive. Currently, the pipeline for BAME academics is particularly grim. Now, BAME is a term for all of our international and global listeners. It's a term that's used to refer to people from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups in the United Kingdom. It's not a term that I personally like to use because BAME is not a homogeneous group that you can clump together, because we are all different. Each group has different challenges and struggles and therefore different needs. And it's made evident by the statistics. Now, according to recent figures published this year, 2020, by HESA, which is the Higher Education Statistics Agency in the UK, less than 1% of all professors across the United Kingdom are Black. Yeah, I would like to insert the crickets chirping sound here because it actually is quite alarming. 0.7% to be exact. And very few British universities employ more than 1 or 2 Black professors. Now, if we contrast these statistics across BAME groups at a professional level, out of 21,520 professors across the UK, about just over 6% are Asian, and just over 10% identify as being mixed or other ethnic groups. And you can compare that to the majority, which is just close to 83%, which are white. So the difference is quite alarming. So in searching for reasons behind these startling figures, one of the major factors is the lack of inclusion in academia. BAME academics in particular are subject to several forms of bias, sexism, cultural stereotyping, discrimination, and even racism, which makes being open and inclusive difficult to achieve. However, what is encouraging is to know that there are ways in which the academic community can reduce the impact of biases or even change them altogether. And one way is to put a spotlight on what it means to be an inclusion ally. Now, many of you may know or may not know the famous Hollywood actor Joaquin Phoenix. You may remember him from movies such as The Gladiator or The Joker, which are both amazing films, by the way. Well, earlier this year in February, he courageously used his platform at an award ceremony to be an inclusion ally. And he talked about systemic racism in the entertainment industry. Now, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link below this episode. It was so moving. He bravely admitted that he himself had been part of the problem by not insisting that the projects he worked on be inclusive, and that true change is the obligation, quote, of the people that perpetuate and continue to benefit from a system of oppression to be the ones that dismantle it, end quote. Now, don't you see that quote in itself is so powerful? Don't you just love the fact that he, as a human being first, showed empathy and a willingness to change? And you know, for me, inclusion is everyone's issue. I always advocate that everyone should care. It's not a tick box exercise or a favor of some sort. It is about embracing the fact that everyone has unique value that they bring. So, as you know, at the PhD podcast, we are a progressive platform and we're a hub for progressive solutions. So we have come up with a few tips. Firstly, for those who would like to become an ally, how to become an effective one. Secondly, for those who may feel excluded and what to do in those circumstances. And finally, how you can encourage your institution to be proactive about inclusion. Okay, so let's address these one by one. Okay, so the first top tip is for our listeners who would like to become an inclusion ally. Now, you might be asking, who can be an ally? Well, anyone really, regardless of your grade or your position, as allies will be needed across all levels and functions in higher education, from academic to non-academic roles, from admin to professors. We need more diverse and inclusive environments for us all to work in. And personally speaking, it would be lovely to see more professors champion inclusion. Now, how can you become an effective ally? Well, I'd say firstly, be an active listener to the people with whom you want to ally yourself and understand the nature of your own implicit biases and privileges. Do your research on the issues facing the group that you want to align yourself with. Turn up to events that they host, create awareness on social media, campaign for inclusiveness where possible, and more importantly, call out injustices when you see them. Please don't be silent or lukewarm. Be a champion and be present. Even the term ally is a verb, so it requires action. And doing the right thing should not be a part-time effort, but something we should try to do all the time. It's conscious. Here at the PhD podcast, we'll be interested to know if you are already an ally or you would consider becoming one since hearing our podcast. Tag us at the PhD podcast or hashtag us on Twitter. We've already had listeners reach out to us on Instagram and YouTube. So it's really wonderful to see. It's also wonderful to see that major industry companies like Facebook have implemented inclusion allies, which have proven to be successful in changing the culture of the workplace. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. Okay, so the second top tip is for those who may feel excluded. Now, first things first, do not be afraid. Once you succumb to fear, it will start to control you. You need to believe in yourself. You deserve to be here. And what you think of yourself and your self-esteem is key, despite what may be happening around you. Let's be honest here, you will feel bouts of loneliness regardless, because that is the nature of a PhD. And there will be naysayers and people who don't want to include you at times. But you must have the confidence to take up space and let your PhD work speak for itself. I mean, a PhD is awarded on merit, so make sure you keep your eyes on the prize. Just as fear is an important emotion, faith is even more powerful. So instead, hone into a positive mindset as you may be paving the way for future generations behind you. So keep going, believe in yourself, and value your theses. We at the PhD podcast are rooting for you. You can also look back in history upon the shoulders of those who have overcome adversity for inspiration. I love to read the works of Maya Angelou. As many of you know, I mentioned her in episode 1. She was a renowned American poet, singer, and civil rights activist. And she famously wrote a poem called Still I Rise. And most of her works is about survival. She once said, quote, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, the encountering may be the very experience which creates the vitality and the power to endure." End quote. Such a powerful and empowering quote. So remember, a PhD is like a marathon, so you need to have the confidence and a positive mindset that will help carry you through. I do recognize that in some instances where you are excluded, it is important to be mindful, to note it down and record it, have an audit trail, and know when best to escalate it accordingly through official channels. But remember, at the PhD podcast, we're open to all. You can also reach out to us on Instagram, on Twitter, and YouTube. A problem shared is a problem halved. Okay, so now for the third and final tip. How can you encourage your institution to be proactive about inclusion and race? Well, race is one of the 7 protected characteristics by law. And so higher and further education institutions have a legal duty to protect their staff and students from discrimination and injustices, and to foster good relations between different groups of people with protected characteristics. Some of you may know or may not know that many higher education institutions have quotas for BAME students. This is because representation is severely lacking in higher education. But once they are in, there's usually limited or no support available. So institutions, once you open access for underrepresented groups, you have a duty and you must continue to support them. There needs to be services in place, in particular for BAME academics and PhD students, that meets their needs. And if there are none on your campus, don't be afraid to politely speak out. You can feel free to send us an email or comment on our YouTube channel, as we'd like to know what tangible efforts are being made. Here in the UK, we have a race equality charter that was launched in 2016. And it's a national scheme which aims to improve the representation, progression, and success of minority ethnic staff and students within higher education. So, a UK institution can be awarded for developing initiatives and solutions which will make a long-lasting cultural change. And this is likely to increase their world university rankings. So make sure and check whether your university has adopted the Race Equality Charter or equivalent for our global listeners outside of the UK, because who wouldn't want to study or work in an environment where everyone is valued? It's my firm belief that academia cannot reach its full potential unless it can benefit from the talents of the population as a whole. And that's only when we can work together progress can be made. Okay, so we've had an interesting topic that we've discussed today. Please let us know your thoughts on all of our socials at the PhD Podcast. We'll be excited to engage with you all and to facilitate discussions around the world. Please share with your family and your friends and your support systems, and all the sources that we used to support the podcast, and the links will be provided below the episode. I'd also like to take this moment to say a massive thank you to all of our listeners. We've received so many emails, DMs, and messages of support following on from the first podcast. We are ever so grateful for the support. And finally, a quick shout out to Black Women PhDs on Instagram and Twitter who reached out to us in the past week to promote us. Our feature gained hundreds of likes on Instagram, and they have a viewership of over 23,000 followers. So we are immensely grateful. So if you could do us a favor, give us a thumbs up on YouTube and rate our podcast on Anchor, what that would do is enable others to find our content too. So it's been a pleasure as always. You've been tuned in to the PhD podcast with your host, Dr. Ruth, and I wish you all peace, love and light. Stay safe and see you in the next episode.